Daughters of God. Elder Ballard. Elder Ballard. What else?
Figure out your kids' spiritual gifts.
Figure out your kids' spiritual gifts. And
Look
look at your discipline. Just look at yourself. You don't condemn yourself. You don't, judge yourself, But I told you my goal was that you were a little bit frustrated by today. By having a week, that by today you might be just a tad frustrated. Because if you really do the homework with sincerity, you probably would have noticed a few things that maybe, and I'm not saying you're doing them wrong, but just aren't working. And so when it doesn't work, you do the same wrong thing maybe with more intensity because you don't know what else to do. And it's not that you just don't know what else to do. So I would like you to share loudly with any of the above, what you thought of the article, what you think of your own discipline. Even if you thought it was right, maybe it's not getting the results you want, or your Valentine tradition. Any of the above. And I will wait. Yes?
Okay, I'll go. I was very frustrated because my parenting style is do it, and if they don't do it, then I raise my voice a little bit, and if they still don't do it, then I raise my voice louder. But I was overwhelmed because there's so much to learn and adjust and redo in a short amount of time because I have teenagers. And so I thought, why didn't I learn this when they were 2 and 3 and 4? But and then the article was comforting. I'm one that tends to beat myself up because I'm not yet perfected, and I've always been really hard on that. But it's just comforting to know how much value he placed in the women of the church, and basically was saying that Heavenly Father and the Savior placed in raising their children. These are just borrowed children. We have borrowed children until we actually make it back to the kingdom, and then will be allowed to be with us. And so for me, I'm thinking, well, I thought this before, but it really hit hard this week that Heavenly Father and the Savior know these children. They can tell me everything I need to do for these children. And we had some specific instances with our 15-year-old this week that were really eye-opening. And it was just comforting to know that I can just sit and pray. And whenever the Lord's ready, He'll reveal to me what I need to do to help this child. That's His child, not my child. I'm here to lead them back, but that's His actual child, And so the up and down this week was a roller coaster, but yeah, I'm back and ready to learn more how to do it better.
Well, we will talk about some of the tools today, but it's interesting that you could feel the discouragement of it by not knowing it, as well as the comfort. That article I assigned that to give you comfort, because it is a comforting to me. That was one that I printed off, and I have it close and read it from time to time, because we need to have that reassurance that we don't have to do it perfect. We're doing it okay. We're okay. Yes?
I did not read the article.
So you didn't get any comfort. You didn't read the article.
I put down, I didn't know which one in 2008, so there were 3 talks given. So I didn't get that. But I do have to just say, in what you talked about last week, I just tried something really, really simple. Just a little comment that you made, but it's like huge to me, and it was so exciting because I am one, when you gave that example of like, okay kids, it's almost dinner time, I'm gonna need your help. And then literally by the 4th time I say it, and I have to escalate, and then they finally move. But yeah, I have my kids trained so much that way. But I remember you saying there's like always one that doesn't like move, so go up quietly. Last night, I'm like, okay, it's bedtime. And I've done it throughout the week, and the kids are still sitting there, and instead of getting more angry, I went up and I just went, and I think he's not used to that. He's And then Ava was still over there on her phone, and I go up to Ava, and I did the same thing. I touched her, and I go, Ava, yeah, you need to head on up. But I'm like, I love it. It's such a gentler approach, obviously.
Well, you're still in control. When you move the action line down
Yes,
to where you're still at 0,
Yeah.
and you act,
that's right.
you can act not in anger,
Yeah.
you can act in pure love. You can act in love. And I'll bet it was stunning for them.
I could tell they thought they were like in for it or something. And then I just was like, can you head up and do that? And, and also that's a loving gesture, to touch, that touch.
The
And
touch is
that's why
very
it's
secure.
Yeah. And I've never seen my kids move so quickly.
Yeah.
I could yell at the top of my lungs 4 or 5 times and they're still, so that they're used to that, I guess.
Well, they are.
Yeah.
They're waiting for you to move.
Yeah.
Children respond to our movement, not our voice. So we train them but we're usually not willing to act until we're already yelling. So if we pull it back down and we're acting at level 0, then we train them what the word straightway means. You do it straightway. We do it straightway. Yeah, there was another comment. Yes.
I'm a testimonial to this lady in front of me. I started coming when my children were little. I have 8 children, and the last one is at home. And when I would come at first, I would get discouraged because I thought I'll never be able to fix all these things. But the kids forget them.
They do.
And you can change, and it works great.
Aren't they resilient?
And this lady over here, the touch thing, I started having my kids hold on to my hand when they wanted to talk to me because I had been trained to ignore them because there was so many people talking at the same time. I said, if there's something that you need, hold on to my hand and I'll get to you and you'll know that I have your attention. And that worked good. But
That's awesome.
my Valentine's tradition is my husband is not really a big Valentine's person. And it crushed me for the first few years of our marriage. It's just terrible because it was always my favorite thing. And so I started turning it on the kids. And so I have a big Valentine's breakfast and I have decorations more than almost Christmas. Because I just love Valentine's. Red, pink gets me excited. And now it is. It's my favorite holiday. And he comes and does something for me every so often. But the pressure is not there to do it.
Right.
And I still have a good Valentine's, even if he doesn't do it. It's just like an extra.
I like what you said, that you don't put pressure on your husband to make Valentine's. That he wasn't raised in a way that it was important to him, and that you acknowledge that, and you're not having unreal expectations about what he should do for you. That if he does something, that's fabulous. If he doesn't, you still know he loves you and you can do your activities for the kids. I think it's fabulous. I think it's wonderful. Too many wives take offense when unreal expectations are not met. And it's not fair.
With Mother's Day, because I figured out how to turn that on my kids.
Well, you know what? We could talk about that. We could talk about that.
I wanted to share my Valentine's tradition.
Yes.
Really quick. My husband thought this up, and it's really cute. But he always brings flowers home for the girls and a little something for Gavin. And he makes a lobster dinner for all of us.
Now that's
And you're
nice.
like, oh, okay. Well, the kids are included, but yeah, he always includes. So the kids talk about this lobster dinner all year. And so yeah, so I guess they don't have to cook.
See, now your comment's one that we don't want to put online because everybody will be jealous that they don't have your husband.
Oh, no, I think it's fun. I like that he likes to include the kids in our holiday of love.
I think it's wonderful, but I think that that's what it should be about. It's family love, not just couple love. I mean, it should. If you have children, it should extend to the family. It should be a special day to express love for one another, for each other. Any other comments?
So I realized that I've done a pretty good job of teaching my kids to obey my voice. And I don't have to get red hot, and we have consequences set in place if they don't do certain things by the end of the day, because I got tired of yelling, and I've been doing this class for a few years now, and so we've got some things set in place that's fantastic. And but what I realized when I can be super peaceful and go red hot,
is when they fight with each other. The bickering is like instant, and it's not doing jobs or cleaning up after themselves, because that's good. But it's the
Do
the
that again.
instant
Do that
bickering.
again.
It's the instant bickering between the two, and then I'm just hot. I'm like, I'm knock it off, instantly. And so I'm trying to figure out where to be with that, because I don't want them rude and yelling at each other. But that's the one area where I'm still kind of struggling. Is I want them. I fought with my brothers and sisters. I want them to recognize the relationship. So they did it really bad yesterday, and I'm all before the day. And I mean, this was like 7:05, and I'm all, oh, Monday. I'm all, so help me, you guys are gonna go to bed at 8 o'clock all weekend long if this is how you're gonna act Monday morning. But I said, you need to do 2 kind things to each other before the day is over. I'm all, because this is just ridiculous. And so, I'm trying to help them, and they did, and it was really cute and stuff like that. But I got hot about it, and that's like the whole thing I'm trying to avoid. So I don't know.
So your biggest problem is not in being obedient as far as jobs going.
Yeah,
but
we got that down.
the bickering. So what we need to do today, and I will try to be conscious about pointing it out, is there is a logical consequence that comes for bickering. And if I am mindful, I'll say, oh, by the way, this is the one I was talking about. So there is, and there again, you just implement it while you're at zero, before it gets bad. And you implement it a couple of times, and they get it, and they don't want to do it, and so they'll change their behavior. But you have to implement it at zero, or it becomes a punishment. You want it to be a punishment. You want it to be just a logical consequence. We'll go there. Okay, anyone else? Yes. Yes.
It was a learning curve for me to realize how much I don't follow through.
Good.
And this is something that I have been conscious of before even last week, but I realized that I still can use improvement even though I'm working on it, and my husband and I are trying to be on the same page.
Okay, so what does that look like, not following through? If you don't follow through, what does that look like? Does
I'll
that mean
say,
you're...
if this doesn't happen, this is gonna happen, and then I don't do that. I don't make them accountable for.
So
and
you
I
give
don't-
empty threats.
And sometimes I even on a positive, well, it's not positive, but I try to make it positive, and I don't keep my promise either.
So whether it's a threat or a reward,
Yes,
you don't follow through with it.
not all the time, but there are times where I'm like, oh no. So I need to fix it without making it look like I'm fixing it.
We can do that. Actually, that's when it's really easy to fix without, you just follow through. You be very, very careful about what you promise either way, either the reward or the consequence. Be real careful what you promise, and just be sure, even if you have to write yourself a note and put it on the fridge, that you do it. But be very careful how many times. My guess is, not knowing the situation, is that you make too many of those. And as we use that too often, it becomes hard to always be consistent in following through, because we've made too many of them. But if we make very few of them, we're more mindful of the ones we've made, and then we are more apt to follow through with them.
And I'm not trying to take away my kids' independence, because I don't want them depending on those either. I want them to do it because they know that's what they should do and what's right, not because mom's
That's
doing
right.
it.
That's right. But in the beginning, it's a good thing to have that stimulus at the end as a teaching tool, and it's not bad. I read an article not too long ago about a teacher had written an article about positive reinforcement. You hear a lot about positive reinforcement, if they do something, positive reinforcement. And he was saying children outgrow positive reinforcement, and it becomes a payoff. You know, the positive reinforcement becomes a payoff. So you have to be very mindful that you're not it's not a reward, but in the beginning, I think positive reinforcement's very good. But then there's a point where you break it off And they do it because it's the right thing to do. But sometimes in the beginning, to motivate behavior, I don't think it's a bad thing. To continue with it is not good. Does that make sense?
When I do that, I put a reminder in my phone. And I'm
What a
like,
good idea!
I'm all follow up on consequence or do the reward or whatever. And I just stick a reminder in for when my deadline is with them or a little like a couple hours before. And I just, our phones with us all the time. So
Okay, now the only problem with that is you have to be smarter than me because I don't know how to put the reminders in the phone.
It's just
But
like
you,
a calendar.
you set the consequence and put the reminder in the phone. That's a great idea. That's a great idea.
That's
I
how
have-
get everything.
I have to tell you about my daughter. Well, I'm not sure I want this to go viral, but anyway, she has the cutest 15-year-old teenage daughter. Oh, I guess she's 16 now. She had a birthday. She's 16-year-old. But she's as yellow as ever yellow. And therefore, one of her sterling attributes is she's messy. She's just messy. And she cannot keep her room cleaned up. So I was talking with my daughter, and they had been having this discussion over a period of time about how she needed to get her room cleaned up, that it really was awful. And her daughter was very discouraged because the room really was a mess. And so she was saying, it would take me 8 hours. It'll take me all day to do this. I can't do it. It'll take me all day. It'll take me all day to do this. They finally came to loggerheads, and my daughter just had it out with her one night and said, you will get it clean and you will not come downstairs until it's clean. And she had wanted to go someplace with her friends that night. And she just said, the room will be clean. You will not come downstairs until it's clean. And then we'll talk about, if you want to go with your friends. And so she did. She went, got her room, spick and span. She came down. I happened to be over there the night it happened. We were having an Olympics party, so I was there. And so her daughter said, can I go with my friends? And her mom looked at her and he said, well, do you have a right to ask me that question? And she said, yeah. And my daughter said, okay, I'm going to go up and check. And so she went up and checked. And it was beautiful. She had done it beautifully. And she came back down and they discussed her going with her friends, and she went with her friends that night. And nothing else was said, and it was great, it was wonderful. And so I was with my daughter again yesterday, and she said that Chelsea had come to her and asked if she could do something else. And she just looked at her and smiled and says, do you have a right to ask that question? And Chelsea said, yes. And she says, well, I'll go check. And she went and checked. Her room was still clean, still immaculate. Came back down. They discussed what she wanted to do. She wanted to stay and run cross country, I think, after school yesterday. So she was able to do it. She stayed and ran cross country. And my daughter picked her up. And she said, that has now become one of the W's. When they ask to go somewhere, they have to ask where they're going and what they're going to do and who they're going to be with and when they're going to be home. And she says, now for this daughter, that also is part of the W questions. So, do you have the right to ask to go? And she says, it's just going to be part of there's no argument, there's no anything. It'll just be part of can you ask? And I thought, see, now that's a logical consequence. That's a logical consequence. And imposed in a great way at level 0, maybe not the first time, but, just at level 0, and now it's an ongoing thing, and it's just part of the structure, just part of it. And so it's great. It's great. I thought it was very well done. It was a good example of that. Anyone else before we start? Okay. So last week we kind of talked about, let's kind of review. We talked about the action line, which is to move your action down. We talked about them earning privileges. The privileges are not rights. And so you hold them in tighter when they're younger, and as they grow older, they earn those privileges. And then you don't have the battle of pulling back. Particularly things with electronics. Just because everybody has one in 7th grade or 6th grade doesn't mean that you're ready for it. And when we talk on the lesson on morality, we'll talk about how you prepare them to be ready for electronics. But age, just because you're 11 or just because you're 12, and age does not buy that privilege. Responsibility buys the privilege. And you may be 16 and still not be responsible. But you have to decide, what that's going to look like. And then help them understand that when they're responsible, when they understand what it's to be used for and how to use it, that they're qualified. It's like driving a car. You take driver's training when you learn how to drive, when you have the opportunity, but then you drive how many hours with mom and dad? So even though you have some of these privileges, mom and dad's still going to be checking and still going to be walking beside you and still going to be helping you learn to navigate some of those privileges. So, they're earned. What is the best form of, I guess, discipline? I don't know how to ask this question. The best thing to do for discipline is, that's a lousy way to ask the question. Especially when I'm fishing for a answer. That's really bad. That's nasty. Okay, is to have the good relationship. Have the relationship intact, and then when you have to correct, it does not ruin that relationship if your relationship is close, then you can. The emotional bank account needs to be full. You need to work on keeping that full. And when it is, your ability to correct misbehavior without ruining the relationship is greater. And that bank account stays full at, what's the percentage? 10 to 1. It's 10 to 1. Did anybody work on that this week? Really work on the positives? I'm seeing this. Meaning, Andrea, you've worked on it a lot. How'd it go?
It was okay. My daughter's 6, and she last year she wanted to do something for Valentine's Day. And it's my dad's birthday, so we didn't grow up celebrating Valentine's Day. We grew up celebrating my dad's birthday. So last year we went and got Valentine tins, and cut out hearts and had everybody leave hearts, love notes for everybody. And so this year she decided, she's like, Mom, do we get to do that again? And I was like, oh, we're gonna do that again. So then I was like, yeah, we'll do that again. So I made her go get hearts and cut them out herself. So they're all these crooked little hearts, but they're just sweet. Anyway, and so everybody gets to leave love notes again. So we're doing that again. And so I've tried really, really, really hard this week. Like I sit down at night when I'm writing my journal and I'm like, okay, what did my kids do that I can tell them was good so that they can at least start their day out good, that I can remember. But it forced me to have to stop and think about what I saw during the day and what I was grateful for during the day that they were doing that was good, so that they could come down in the morning and they could have their little treat in their box and they could read all their notes and then they could go to school, or then they could start their day. So that's kind of what we did.
See, I think that's awesome. I think that's awesome. And it's wonderful that once a year Valentine's Day comes around and we actually are forced, if you will, to think about that. So you can put their little hearts in their mailboxes, their at-home mailboxes. But a lot of it is changing our own personal habits to look for the positive versus the natural reaction to the negative. You have to train yourself to actually look for the positive. I want to throw in, just for those of you who don't know, Andrea has these wonderful teenagers, and then this huge gap, and then this little girl sitting on the end. And so she did all of these things with the first 4, and then all of a sudden they're gone and think, we don't need to write little heart Valentines to everybody every day. But the 6-year-old says, I need it. And so if you happen to have a gap family, you really still need to focus on the needs of the little one. Just because you've done it once doesn't mean you're done. It means she still needs it, and they still need to learn to be conscious of the needs of this younger sibling. It teaches them how to be married, to look to the needs of someone else. Yes?
I never thought about the fact that I've been filling their emotional little bank accounts. Like 4 or 5 years ago, probably 5 years ago, I started every night when I say goodnight to my kids, I tell them something that I loved about them that day. And I've shared that in class before, but I still do it. And when my husband's home, they expect him to do it too, just because I.
That's good.
So he's like, oh, you always make me do this. But we just say something that we loved about them from that day, and it's just so habit and ingrained. They don't really think about how vital it is to
It's totally
continue to
vital.
do that. And I just wanted something different, so no matter how cruddy the day was,
Yeah.
or whatever, they know that they're loved and that I see specific things about them.
I like
today.
that. I like that at night, when you talk them into bed,
And my 14-year-old, she still needs to.
that you express something that they did that you saw positive. I think that's wonderful. And I just think that is a habit that we need to develop more. And it is a habit, and it's really kind of keep note of yourself and see how often. That's one. You got to do it 10 to 1. So if every 10 days you get mad at them, that works out great. But if it's more often, you have to figure out a way to do it sometimes through the day. Okay, so what we're going to talk about today is I'm going to give you 14 tools. I don't think you have 14 in your book, in your syllabus. So I've added a few over the years that I think that are good. And so I think you have 11? Oh boy, look what we're going to do. We're going to add a few more. So we'll add 3 more that are really good. So some of these you already are familiar with. You may not have recognized them as a tool of discipline. Some of them you do recognize as a tool of discipline, but you use them wrong. And so then instead of a tool of discipline, it becomes a tool of punishment. And so we want to pull it back so that what is discipline? What is discipline? It's an opportunity to teach so that they can change inappropriate behavior. It is a teaching tool. Discipline is to teach. It's not to punish for misbehavior. It's to teach them correct behavior and give them that opportunity to change. It's harder than punishment, and it takes much more time. But it's more effective in the long run. So, number 1, the first one is choices. To give your children choices. Choices empowers a child. It makes them feel like they're in control of their life. And so, with particularly red children, they feed off of being able to have choices. And so, instead of saying, go clean your room, you could say, would you rather clean, you need to clean the bathroom and your bedroom. Which one would you rather do first? The choice is not, would you like to do your jobs? The choice is, which one do you want to start with? So if you think things through, in a lot of cases, you can create choices for children. Now, the rule with choices is it doesn't matter. Whatever. If you give 2 choices, they both have to be okay with you. It's not a guessing game to guess which one mother really wants you to say. So if you say, would you like to have Cheerios for breakfast, which is the quick and easy fix, or would you rather have Belgian waffles, and you're hoping that they'll choose Cheerios because you really are in a hurry, don't give them a choice. You just say, this morning we're having Cheerios. Because if you give choices, you have to be good with either choice. Now, as children get older and you've taught them, for example, jobs, what jobs have to be done in the home, they can reach a point, and they can still be pretty young, but they can reach a point where you can say, you can choose your jobs tonight. And write them down. You need to have 5, and one of them has to be a hard one. So write them down, bring me your list, and so that I can see, but you can choose. So you can reach that point after they've done a whole bunch of jobs and they know kind of the hard ones, they know the easy ones. If you just say choose 5 jobs, they'll say, oh, well, I'll water the dog and I'll, they'll pick 5 that are ridiculously easy. But if you let them know, they can have, 4 that are easy and 1 that's a little bit more challenging, then they'll do great. They'll do great. So you can use it with, would you like to stop crying and come play with us when you stop crying? You're making a choice. You could, but if you want to keep crying, that's okay too. You just take it out to the backyard. So you could stop crying if you'd like to and come play with us, or you can take the crying out to the backyard. Which would you like to choose? And sometimes they would like to stop crying and come play, and sometimes they're so frustrated that they really will choose to take their crying out to the backyard for a little while till they can calm down, and then they're happy to come in. So there's a lot of ways to use choices. Whites need to have choices. Reds need to have choices because they need that. They need to feel power in their life. A white needs to have choices because they hate to make choices. And they need to learn how to make choices when it really doesn't matter. Either way is fine. They need to learn. You'll have some children that will come down, even as they're up into later grade school, and say, which blouse should I wear? Or how should I do my hair? Or trying to get you to make, it doesn't matter, choices for them because they don't want to make them. And so you have to be careful that you reach the point where you recognize that it's their responsibility. It's part of their growing up that they need to learn how to make choices. And you just simply say, well, which one would you like? Which one do you think would make you feel happy today? And throw it back to them. So choices is a really good thing. But the rule is be sure that you're comfortable with whatever choices you give. And usually it's beneficial to only give 2 because you can hang on to 2. You start having a whole bunch, then you forget what they all are. So it's usually better to have 2 that they can choose from. Any questions on choices? Most of you use choices. And it's a great tool, both with little people. Little tiny people can't do choices because they haven't learned to conceptualize quite yet. But as they get older, they can. And it gives them a feeling of self-control and power, that they have power over themselves, and that you're not just this dictator that's bossing them.
So I do this with my son all the time. He must be red, I think. But he always wants to negotiate, constantly. He feels the power from that. Do you allow them to, or no, it's A or B?
Well, it depends. Is C an option that's okay?
It's just, yeah, maybe, but there's always a C.
Well, reds will do that, and they'll try to engage you. And you have to decide what is your emotional level. If you are not in an emotional state to be engaged, then you say kindly, today it's A or B. But I want to, why can't I want to? Nevertheless, today, that's what you put in the magic word, today it's A or B. But some days your emotional level is, you just, are happier than other days. And so then if you want to look at C as an option, and it really is an okay option, then you can say, okay, that's fine. If you would rather do that, that's okay. If you say your jobs are clean your room or do the dishes, and he says, yeah, I really don't want to. I want to be outside. I really would rather be outside. I don't know what to do. Fine, if you'd like to mow the lawn, that's okay. Be outside. So sometimes truly it's okay. It doesn't matter. Sometimes it matters. And it doesn't. Sometimes it matters because of what they present. Sometimes it matters because you just can't negotiate it. There's not enough energy left in you to negotiate it. And so don't argue. but use magic word nevertheless, and just say, well, today, nevertheless, today it's A or B, and maybe tomorrow you can pick your own 2 jobs. Be mindful of them, but also be mindful of your emotional energy. Because it's not wrong to say it's A or B, but it's also not wrong to consider C. It's okay if it's an appropriate choice.
Right.
So that's okay. And Reds frequently will do that because they want to feel empowered, and it's important for a Red to feel they have power, because otherwise they'll be fighting you all the time. So it's important for them to feel like you're giving them power. It's a good thing. That is a good thing. If you can help also teach them to use it wisely. Okay, number 2 is gating. Gating.
Gating like a gate?
Gating. Exactly. That's exactly what it's like. It's like a gate that swings both ways. You've seen a gate in front of some people's houses instead of just swinging one way? It's like a French door. It actually swings both ways. So you can push it and go that way, or you can push it and come this way. And that's what this tool is called, and it's gating. And it is creating a situation that's win-win. It's a situation where I am your cheerleader, and I want you to be able to do what you want to do. But I also am your mother, and I need certain things done. So gating was like Chelsea cleaning her room. You get your room clean, which is what I need to have happen, and then you can go run cross country today. You can go be with your friends. It's a win-win that you set up. Now, gating only works if there's a hot button. If there's no hot button, if there's nothing they want, then it won't work. So with a lot of whites that tend to live this flatlined life, it doesn't work. Because you say, well, get your room cleaned up and then you can go to the football game Friday night with your friends. And they don't do it, and Friday night comes along, and then you have to stick to your word with gating. And you say, okay, well, I guess you're not going. Or they'll come and say, can I go? And you'll say, well, is your room done? And they'll say, no. And you say, well, I feel really bad about that. They say, oh, okay, doesn't matter. It loses its value. So gating only works if they have a hot button. And the hot button is any privilege they're seeking. And that can be electronic time. It can be playing games on wherever you play your games, iPad, whatever, computer, phone. It can be phone time. It can be text time. It can be TV time. It can be going out with friends, earning that opportunity to go and be with friends. So gating has to have a hot button or it won't work. And you have to follow through. So if you say your room has to be clean before you go to the game Friday night, and it's not clean, and their friends are sitting out in front of the house in the car ready to pick them up, you just simply stand firm, but you're on their side. You stand firm and say, I am so sorry. I am so sorry. Maybe next week. But no, not tonight.
Isn't that just a reward? I mean, not that part. I mean, if they get to go to the game.
No, they've earned it. Usually, reward is a pay. I'll pay you M&Ms for going potty, and then I'll give you a sucker if you clean your room, and then I'll give you a candy bar if you walk the dog. And they get consistently bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. You and I get to have privileges if we do our work. So if you get all your work done by noon, you can have 2 hours before the kids come home. And if you don't get your work all done before noon, you don't get anything. So it's a natural part of life. It's a natural part, this gating. Does that make sense? You can say it's a reward, but it's to me, a reward is I'm going to give you something or pay you something for doing something, and this is you're earning it. It's you're earning it, and a lot of it is a mental approach to it. So if you do your part, I want to help you have whatever you want. Yes.
I think one of the differences I'm seeing between the two is that with dating, a lot of the things they're earning are going to happen regardless of whether they earn them or not. Like going out with friends. Their friends are still going to go out.
Right.
Or going to the track, whatever, running
Yeah.
with your friends. Like,
Yeah.
they're going to do that.
It's going to
not-
happen.
Right, whereas a reward would be like, okay, if we all do our chores, we're going to go to Roaring Springs at the end of the month or whatever. You're creating that reward, whereas dating, maybe some of the things that happen regardless. The world moves on without them. You know?
Good insight. Yeah. Good thought. Good thought. Gating works really well with any age. With any age. They just have to have a hot button. So if they're old enough to have a hot button, gating can work. But it has to be done at level 0. You have to follow through. You have to follow through. And you have to be their cheerleader if they don't make it. So those are the rules.
How do you cheer them on?
By being, I am so sorry you don't get to go. That makes me feel bad. And I'll say, well, then why don't you let me go?
So we'll say that.
Because you knew what you had to do. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry you chose not to. It won't be as much fun staying home with me. Yes.
And see, I'm yellow, and I think that's why I don't follow through. Because it's hard for me to have them miss out on those social things. And so it's hard for me. And not that social things are that important, but when they're like, oh, I'm sorry you have to hang out with me. It would be as hard for me to see them sitting there upset. I'd be like, so I think the gating is hard for me.
Hard to be bad guy.
It is hard for me.
Yellows have a real hard time being the bad guy.
Like the gating doesn't work.
Yeah.
very
And that's why we have 14 tools.
well. That's right.
Because maybe this isn't the best one for you to use.
It makes me sad to see them sad.
Yeah, you're going to have an interesting experience with parenting.
That's right.
You see, I want to live in her house. If you're full of pouty face, you can get it. Please, Mama. I love it. I love it. Okay, number 3 is practicing. This is one of my personal favorites. But it's very, very easy to use practicing inappropriately, and it'll turn into a punishment. So you have to be very careful to monitor yourself in practicing. Because if you get off 0, it quickly turns into a punishment. You have to remain on 0 no matter what their reaction is. But practicing is a fabulous, fabulous tool. And it's based on the principle that anything we do, we practice, we can become better at. And so it's giving them that opportunity to do the same thing over and over and over until they become proficient at it. And they will have they will have the tendency to become very angry at it. So you have to retain humor and a spirit of buoyant. Yellows would have the perfect personality to retain it, but not the perfect personality to apply it. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Because they have great sense of humor, and they're happy, and that's the way it has to be applied. Even though the participants aren't very cheery. So let me give you a couple of examples. My favorite one that I used with my children growing up was sacrament meeting. I am absolutely have always been strong advocate that sacrament meeting is a time where we go to worship the Lord. It is not extended play day. And I've been on that soapbox. You know I have that soapbox. So I'm not out to offend anybody. That's just my soapbox. And so when my kids were all home and they were little, my husband was bishop. So he's sitting up there on the stand, and I have 9 children here under the age of 9 who are very interesting to control. Now, if you have children of that age, and, you know, in our ward, there's families that are taking a child out multiple times, or the children are getting up and going out multiple times during sacrament meeting, and that just tends to irritate me because I feel like there is no reason for it. If you go to the bathroom, you can sit 1 hour without going to the bathroom, and you are not going to dehydrate in 1 hour if you don't have a drink. And you can have a drink when you're on your way to primary, and you can go potty when you're on your way to. I mean, granted, there are exceptions, but to me, they're the emergency kinds of exceptions. If you have a baby with a blowout, you might take them out. But I think we train our children to know when they can go, and we train them to know that coming to church means I get to play on your phone or the iPad or whatever else you bring. So I think my son was probably about 3, and he's the 4th child. So one time I went to a sacrament meeting and I guided him in a bench, and we hadn't even sat down. And he said, "Can I have some Cheerios?" We had not even sat down. And I thought, what am I teaching my children? I am teaching them that this chapel bench means snack time. And that's not the message I want them to learn. And so that was the last time I ever took Cheerios, ever, for any child. Nobody got them. That was it. That was done. And so then you have to say, if you pull something out, you better put something in. So we had to have a different kind of view of what does it look like to go to sacrament meeting. You can't expect them to do something you haven't taught them. And you also have to remember that teaching them it's not an event. Just because you teach them once doesn't mean they're going to learn it forever. So it's a process of learning because it's a process of learning self-control for children. And so anyway, they were a little bit older. I mean, I probably had, I don't know, maybe 6 kids or so, and was probably pregnant and probably had a baby. And anyway, I'm sitting with these kids, and they would vie not to sit next to me. They did not want to sit next to their mother because the ones that sat right here, they were good because I could handle them. But you get out past my arm's length, and they weren't always so good. So one day we had a particularly obnoxious time during sacrament meeting, and I had it. So on the way home, and Mike was still staying for bishop stuff, and so on the way home, as they're all in the car, I said, "Okay, guys, as soon as we get home, I want everybody to go into the family room. We're going to have a little meeting before we have snacks, before we do anything, just everybody into the family room." And I said it just like that. Now, if you're a child and you hear mom say that, you think, "Woohoo! Party!" And so they all immediately went right into the family room and they sat down. And I said, I don't know if you know that if we do something over and over, we get really good at it. So Nate, if you wanted to be a really good basketball player, what would you do? Well, you go out and practice shooting hoops. You're right. You're right on. If you want to be a really fast runner, I have a son who, from the time he was teeny, he wanted to be a fast runner. He would run everywhere he went. Now I'd say, Ty, if you want to be a really, really fast runner, what do? Well, you practice running. Yes, you do. Now, here was a kicker. If you want to be really good in sacrament meeting, what should we do? They look at you like you're crazy. And I says, what is the correct behavior for sacrament meeting? Fold your arms. Oh, that's a good idea. Okay, everybody fold your arms. Everybody fold your arms. Don't talk. Oh, that's a good idea. That's a good one. That's a good one. Okay, yeah, no talking. Don't touch whoever you're sitting by. Could you tell I had said these things a bazillion times? Okay, good idea. Don't poke anybody you're sitting by. Okay, that's great sacrament meeting behavior. We're going to practice that for 5 seconds. On your mark, get set, go. Do you think 5 little boys can sit there for 5 seconds and not do anything? No. You know, they started out, then they look at each other, then it's, you know, and they start giggling and they start laughing. And so then I said, okay, we need to do it again. That wasn't very good. You guys didn't do it. That wasn't very good. Okay, 7 seconds this time. What? 7 seconds. On your mark, get set, go. Oh, and of course they didn't make it through. And so then we went for 10 seconds. Each time I'd up it a couple of seconds. That day they never made it through. They never did it. But they knew I was serious. Even though I wasn't yelling and I wasn't screaming, they knew I was serious. And so finally I said, okay, just remember this for next week. Remember this for next week. Because if we can't get it, we'll have to practice some more. And they say, okay, everybody can go have lunch and have your snacks, do whatever. So the next week, on the way to church, I said, okay, kids, do you remember what we did last week after sacrament meeting? Oh, we had to practice. Yeah, we got to practice. And if we can't do it today, do you know what we get to do after sacrament meeting? Practice. Yes, that's right, that's right. Okay, just so you remember. So we went in and sat down. You know, they were usually pretty good up past the sacrament. And then it gets long. It gets long for little people. And so when they'd start acting up, I just would lean out so I could see the one down at the end. And I'd say, and it worked. You know, it worked. So that's one way to use practice. If you ask my children today what I did in sacrament meeting, they'd say, it was your eyebrow, Mother. You always raised your eyebrow. And I knew when you raised your eyebrow that we were in trouble. And I would. I'd raise my eyebrow at them. And they still to this day. Oops, there goes Mother's eyebrow. You know? So, but that's one way to use practice. Let me tell you another way to use practice. Boyd K. Packer, this is in his book, Teach You Diligently. He shared an experience and he said, sometimes when we are disciplining our children, we'll tell them to do something, but we don't give them a big picture. We kind of teach them in increments, in segments, and expect them to behave in the big picture. And it doesn't compute quite with them. And so, for example, you have children that come home from school and drop their backpacks right by the front door or in the living room on the way to the kitchen to have a snack.
I used this last year and it works.
It does. It does. It does work. Boyd K. Packer, you know, woo! So anyway, so they drop their backpacks. And you have said, okay, kids, pick up your backpacks. Don't leave your backpacks in the living room. Come get your backpacks. And you're always reminding them. And you're a good mother, so you don't pick up their backpack for them. But you feel like, why do I always have to remind them? Can't they remember? So this is where he says we're not teaching the big picture. So he says what you do is you have them go get their backpacks, take them back outside to the end of the driveway, and say, okay, we're going to practice coming in and putting your backpack away. Okay, so everybody get your backpacks. Everybody who happened to have one left in the room, he can come in. Bring him in. So everybody gets their backpacks. Now this is where you have to be. Can you see where this can turn into punishment real fast? If you say, okay, I'm sick of this, get your backpack, get it on, you're into punishment. But if you say, okay guys, come on, let's get your backpacks, we're going to try this again and see if we can get it right. We're just going to practice doing it right. So put your backpack on. You know, they're going to look at you like you're crazy. Be firm. Be very kind, but be very firm. Be sure they get their backpacks on. Help them, walk with them, go with them down to the end of the driveway. Say, okay, now, you just remember where the backpack goes when you get in the house. Okay, on your mark, tricycle. Have them go back up, and they put their backpack, they'll put it away if you do that. Tomorrow, if they forget, they get to do it twice. The next day, they get to do it 3 times because practice helps them become better. But I promise you, after about 3 days, they won't forget for a period of time. Does that mean they'll never slip up again? No, they will. They will. But for a period of time, they won't. And it beats lecturing them every day. It retains the relationship. Yes?
I was just gonna say, I was talking to him, there's a gentleman in our ward, and he has, I think they have like 4 little ones. And we were at Maverick one night, and he came in with the kids to get a little treat. And they were all dressed in their Sunday clothes. It was like Friday or Saturday. And I said, well, what are you guys up to tonight? He goes, well, we had a tough time being reverent in sacrament last week. So we got to go practice tonight in church. I think he has a key.
He has a key. He has a key.
So they had to dress, and I looked at the kids, and they were looking at me. I was so depressed, and I go, oh, you guys went to church and had to, and he goes, and the dad, he was so nice. Russ was so nice about it, and I never heard of like a parent doing that, but yeah, it was clever. If they're not going to be reverent, then they're going to have to go on a day off and practice. You know, he just had them sit there and practice. But,
I think it's a great idea
yeah.
to take them back to church on Saturday and put them in their Sunday clothes and have them practice sitting. I think it's wonderful. This practice, that using that as a tool is fabulous. It's fabulous because remember, it's action that teaches. It's not your lecture series. And I think it is critical. If you go back, if you just want to have a little, when you're bored someday, you just don't know what to do, get about the last 4 enzymes and look in the index in the front, when it talks about the topics that have been spoken on, and look how many times people have talked about the Sabbath day or the sacrament. And it is important to the Lord. It is very important to the Lord. Especially in this day, in these times, it is a safeguard against the temptations of Satan. And so it is critical that we learn to honor the Sabbath day and the sacrament, which means you don't just come, but you come to worship. And we have to teach our children that principle. So they don't just get it. Particularly when moms and dads are playing on their phones and texting and doing all kinds of things, children don't get it. They don't get it. As they get older, have them take notes. Have them take notes on the speaker, and then as you come home and have Sunday dinner, talk about what the speakers have talked about. If your husband happens to work on Sunday, have kids take notes and then tell him when he gets home from work what happened in church and what's going on. Help pull them in to some responsibility and accountability for what's going on in that meeting. Just sitting quiet isn't necessarily being reverent. Reverent is when you sit quiet and think about appropriate things. So it's teaching and training that, and great topic for family home evenings. Anyway, we're really zipping through these. Number 4 are family meetings or family councils. And we do not use these enough in the church. And so one of your homework assignments will be this article that is found in the Liahona in January of 2015. And it's called Counsel Together Oft, Family Councils. And it is wonderful. It gives 6 keys, principles for family councils that you can look at, and so that you can understand how to have a family council. And so this is one of your homeworks that I want you to look this up and read this. But just for right now, let's talk about a couple of the principles for family councils. The purpose of a family council is to resolve problems, look at them and resolve them, not blame anyone for them. Family council is a forward-looking meeting. So you don't come to the meeting to blame somebody else for actions in the past. Mom can come to the meeting and say, you know, I'm having a problem because we don't seem to be able to get our jobs done. That's stating a problem. It's not blaming a person and saying, what can we as a family do to resolve this problem? It's a positive experience. Family councils should always be positive. They should always be problem solving. They should always be looking forward. They should always start with prayer to invite the Spirit to be there. And it is an opportunity for everyone is free to express feelings as long as they're not blaming, as long as they're not criticizing, as long as they're not blaming. The problem we usually have with family councils is when the conversation gets difficult, we quit. And we need to persevere and go through till we can come to resolution. Now, a family council can be used to resolve problems, but it can also be used to plan a family vacation. It can be used to plan a family service project. It can be used to plan a family learning experience. So it's not just like a court where we're coming to judge and jury. It's not that at all. You can plan calendars with your family council. I would suggest that you consider, now this is not doctrine, this is just practice, but I would say that you consider not having family council in conjunction with family home evening, unless you choose to say, our first family home evening of the month will be a family council, like they do in Relief Society now. And they're saying, you know, the first lesson of the month, you sit in council, and we do councils in Relief Society and priesthood meeting. And so you could say, our first family home evening of the month will be a council, and we will counsel together and talk about the needs of our family. It is presided by the priesthood. So the dad is in, he presides. Every member of the family can bring items to the table. One of the ways you can use family councils as resolving conflict is when you have toddlers that come up to you and say, he never lets me play with his toys, or he never cleans his side of the room, or whatever it is. You can say, do you know what? Why don't you put that on the agenda for our family council and we'll discuss it? And you would be surprised how quickly some of those will get resolved before family council comes up, because they don't want to talk about it in family council. So, but it is an option for anyone in the family to bring to the table anything that's bothering them. And if you, to be effective, it needs to become a habit. It needs to be something that you do often, that they become familiar with, that they know that nobody will be criticized or blamed in front of the family. It's not court. It's not a court. It's a forward-looking, let's find resolution for whatever, or let's make plans for whatever. It's an opportunity to assign responsibilities if you're making plans and say, okay, we've decided we're going to take a vacation this summer and we want to go to see Mount Rushmore. So son that's 15, Johnny, you are responsible for looking at what the costs for hotels are there. Sam, you're 17. We want you to come to home evening next week with a history of Mount Rushmore, so that we kind of have a feeling for what it is we're going to go see, and let's learn about it. And so, it's an opportunity to also make assignments and have them return and report. And now you're teaching them to be an Elders Quorum president, a Relief Society president, a mother, a father. They're learning to have responsibility and learning to accept it. So family councils are a fabulous training tool, as well as an opportunity to resolve any kind of conflict and to create positive experiences in the family. But it has to be regular, and it has to be used properly. Elder Ballard has written a wonderful book on councils. He's talking more about the councils in the church, but the principles are the same. And so if you don't have an idea about what this looks like, it's a good book to just review and look at and see and see what you think. This article is really very good also. So number 5, makeups. I love this. Makeups is the principle of when you have hurt some. First of all, it's you learning to take responsibility or coming to accept the fact that when you do something, it may hurt someone else's feelings. And so often a child will say, well, I didn't mean to. I didn't mean to hurt his feelings. Like, you have the choice to be hurt or not. Now, my intention was not to hurt you. So if you choose to be hurt, then it's your fault, not mine. And a lot of adults have grown up to believe that. And they make kind of interesting marriage partners when that's their concept of, well, I didn't intend to, so you have your agency to be hurt or not. We want to say, teach them that if my actions, whether I intended to or not, hurt someone, then I am responsible for seeking to make that better. And that's what makeups are. So if they are, so often we'll say, well, tell them you're sorry, give them a hug, and they'll say, I'm sorry. Nothing changed. Nothing changed. So when you get involved then in having to do an act of kindness to make up for your act which caused hurt, then you become more aware of feelings. Let me just kind of create an example so you can see what I'm saying. Let's say it's Valentine's Day, and your husband is supposed to come home on time for Valentine's dinner. You've said be home at 6 o'clock because we're going to have a special party and it starts at 6 o'clock. And 6 o'clock rolls around and he's not there. And something inside of you will kind of snap because you have gone to a lot of effort to make it special. You fixed a special dinner, you have some decorations, you made a dessert, which you don't usually have. You've done all of these extra things and you've told him and you've reminded him and he's promised and you've told him and you reminded him and he's promised. And he's not home on time. And at 6:30, now about every 5 minutes you're looking at the clock as the clock goes around and you're just going, and by the time he comes home, now let's take 2 scenarios. He walks in the door and he says, I am so, so sorry. I left work, but there was an accident on the freeway and I was stuck. I couldn't get off. I couldn't do anything. The accident was practically in front of me and they were clearing it and, all the lanes of traffic were stopped and there is nothing I could do and my phone battery was dead and I couldn't call you and I am so sorry. What do you say? That's the I'm sorry. And you say, okay, well, fine. Let's go. Let's go have dinner. We've been waiting. Okay, kids, Dad's home. Let's have dinner. Oh, don't we love each other? You just can't, a woman can't say, fine, turn a button, and her emotions are now, woohoo, I love you. We just don't do that. So let's backtrack. So now, same scenario, he's a half hour late, but he takes an extra 3 minutes, runs into Albertson, gets 1 red rose, which is not going to break the bank, and brings it home to you, has it behind him, and he comes in the house and he says, honey, I truly am sorry. I got on the freeway, I couldn't get off, same story, and then he hands you the rose and he says, but I want you to know I really love you. Okay, let's go have dinner. It just melts you when somebody will put action. Again, it's action. When you put action behind your words, it becomes meaningful. So a makeup is an action. You have a child that misbehaves at school, comes home, it's resolved with the teacher, but what's the makeup?
I'm answer that question really quick. Sorry.
We're not answering that question.
It's very much the same.
Yes.
My best friend growing up, she had her son who's like 2 years older than her daughter. She had wrote in her journal, like, "You're ugly and I hate you," like random pages.
Sounds like a
she
brother,
was like-
yeah.
She uses the words, "What are you gonna do to make up for it?" Exactly what you did. So he had to put sticky notes over top each one and write something nice. about it.
Perfect. That was
That
good.
was, yeah, as soon as you said makeup, it made me think of that.
Yeah, that's perfect. So that's a perfect example. That is a perfect example of a makeup. For the school thing, you write the teacher an apology. You don't just say, "I'm sorry." You write a note and you take it and hand deliver it to the teacher. It'll terrify the child, but that's not what you're trying to teach. It's to help them understand they are responsible for emotion, or whether it was intentional or not, they're responsible for hurt or pain or emotion they cause in someone else.
And that's what I brought it up last week. My son, he's a smart little guy, but he's like, even to the older sister, he'll say something cutting and then that's what he says every time. I didn't mean to hurt her feelings. It was Nancy. I didn't even, but he does it every time. And it
So
drives me
then you
crazy.
say, nevertheless, her feelings were hurt, so what will you do then to help her feel better?
Okay.
So
that's-
don't let him off the hook.
So the action is the consequence then
Yes.
for him.
Yeah.
What will you do to make that
Yeah.
better? Okay.
Number 6, nonverbal communication. I love this one. I love this one. We are really not doing well today. Andrea, you're laughing at me. Nonverbal communication is truly nonverbal. You stop talking. We talk way too much. So, for example, I tell my kids no TV after school. And they seem to habitually come in and just turn on the TV. And I'm forever saying, hey, who turned on the TV? Get the TV off. We don't watch TV until jobs are done and homework's done. And, there's no TV. Get the TV off. And it goes on and on and on and on and on and on. So nonverbal communication would be, before they get home from school, you take a sheet and you put it over the TV, and then you draw one of those big yellow smiley faces, the great big happy grin, and tape it on the sheet. And you don't say a word. Nonverbal communication is take a lipstick and write on a mirror, "This bathroom is condemned until further notice." That's nonverbal. There's positive nonverbal communication where you write a note and put it in their lunch. It can be a very positive nonverbal communication. My favorite, though, I have to share with you my favorite. And this is President Eyring when they were raising their kids, and it was his son and 2 of his boys, and his son's telling the story. This is Hal, that's President Eyring, and Kathleen was his wife, and they kind of lived out in a rural place, and their 2 oldest boys had a tendency to watch TV. And so this is the story he told. "My brother and I were in front of the TV one Saturday night around midnight," says Henry J., that's his son. "A show was on that we should not have been watching. It was a comedy. The basement room was dark except for the light from the television. Without warning, Mother walked in. She was wearing a white flowing nightgown and carrying a pair of heavy scissors. Making no sound, she reached down behind the set, grabbed the cord, gathered it into a loop, and then inserted the scissors and cut the cord with a single stroke. Sparks flew, the set went dead, but not before Mother had turned and glided out of the room. Notice not a word was spoken. She came in, cut the cord, and left. Unnerved, Henry J. headed to bed. His innovative brother, however, cut a cord from a broken vacuum and connected it to the television, and soon the boys had plopped back down in front of the television, hardly missing any of their show. Mother, however, got the last laugh. When we came home from school the next Monday, we found the television set in the middle of the floor with a huge crack through the thick glass screen. We immediately suspected Mother. When confronted, she responded with a perfectly straight face. I was dusting under the TV and it slipped. That's nonverbal communication. I love that. Some of you might get divorced if you tried that in your home. But I guess if you were married to President Irene, it was okay. So then they grew up the rest of their life without a TV, and it was fine. You know, they just never had a TV in their home. So, but that's nonverbal. It can be anything. It can be when you catch somebody in bed reading and they're supposed to be asleep, that you simply don't say anything. You walk in and take their book with you out of the room, turn off the light, and you don't say anything. That's nonverbal. It's literally, when I was raising my eyebrow at my kids, that's nonverbal. But it can be positive as well as negative. It's just when we're using it, we tend to use it as a correction. Then, of course, we're working on negative behavior. Okay, putting children in the same boat. This is yours, okay? Putting children in the same boat. Now, several of these are really, really hard for blues because we talk too much. And these are things where we just have to watch what we say, because none of these can be accompanied by a lecture, or they become punishment. So you have to watch what you say. So putting children in the same boat really does not sit well with some mothers, because we are so into, in our parenting, which I think is sad, we're so into being fair and being sure that, you know, it's fair and it's just and it's right and everybody gets the same, and I think that that's poor parenting, because every child isn't the same, and some children, you know, earn more privileges and some less, and I mean they're all just so different that to feel frustrated and try to make everything the same, that shouldn't be a problem that we have. But if that's a problem that you have, this one don't use, because it will absolutely fry you as a parent. So what this is regardless of the situation. For example, we have them bickering. We'll use that as the example. Two kids are fighting again, and we have told them not to fight, and we've lectured them about fighting, and da-da-da-da. So often we want to know who started the fight. What's this all about? Who started this? Who took what from whom? Who hit who first? And we want to go resolve a conflict, when actually at the moment the conflict is that they're both agreeing to argue. So they're both equally, regardless of how it started, they are equally misbehaving. So the consequence then is to put them in the same boat. So in this, if you choose this tool, it is not to resolve it. It is not to find out who's at fault. It's not to be the jury and the judge. It's to say, you're both agreeing to fight, therefore you will both, whatever we do. So let me share with you a couple of things. You can do things like, okay, you're both fighting, so I need to have this sliding glass door cleaned, and I'll put one of you on one side and one of you on the other, and I just need you to clean it. And they'll start out pulling faces at each other, and, you know, and being really mad, and then as it gets more, I would have them do more windows than just one. But, you know, as they get down through the job, then they're actually having fun. You can, depending on the child and your own personal situation, it doesn't even have to be that, and say, okay, I can see that both of you have extra energy, so I want you both to go out on the basketball court, and you can't come in till you've each made 5 buckets. So it doesn't always have to be a job. though it can be. It can be. The one I was thinking about for you, you know those little egg timers
Mhm.
that, what are they?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, one of those. So you say, okay, so what we're going to do is put you both in the same boat, meaning you both have to have the opportunity to do this. And so I'm going to set the egg timer, and you have to mentor this. You have to be there to mentor it. And so you say, okay, here's the egg timer. During this time, you get to say whatever you want, and you must be quiet. Go. Well, you da and you da you. Okay, and they'll start saying, but I did no. No talking from you. When it's over, say, okay, now you get to say whatever you want. And there's going to be a rebuttal, but they can't engage with each other. Then back to you, okay? You get to now. And it'll go back and forth and back and forth. And you just keep it going until one of them will say something about, but that really hurt my feelings. And then, but it hurt my feelings. And then by just taking turns, they'll end up resolving the issue. And they have to stay there and do it until it's resolved. And so that's putting them in the same boat, so they get to have that opportunity. If you do that enough times and they hate it enough, they will learn to resolve without you setting a timer on them. But you're teaching them that process of talking, and hopefully talking about it before it gets into the fighting.
Now, when I do that, like say they, because usually when they're fighting, they don't care if I'm nearby or downstairs or upstairs or whatever, because they're just fighting. Do I seek them out and say, let's do the egg timer kind of situation?
Oh yes,
like,
because
okay,
they don't care if you're there because
Right.
you haven't become involved.
right.
You only become involved when your anger level, and then you just explode. So, and that's not doing any good for them because it's not teaching them how to resolve. So then you say, you know what? It looks like we need to learn how to resolve conflict. So this is what we're going to do. Da-da, 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 da-da.
What if it's right before school like that? Just start it or say we'll do this after school?
Nope,
Or
go for it.
Just do it.
And let them be late to school. And that might be even a little bit more interesting. But then you take them to school and you say, you know, yep, they're tardy and we had to learn a few principles before we got to school today.
That's a
And,
punishment for me because my daughter rides the bus.
no, you'd have to end up taking them that day, but sometimes we pay the price for teaching a principle. I promise you, they won't do it
I like
before
it.
school the next day. They might do it after school the next day. Natural consequence, yes, oh, yes.
I just saw a picture on the internet recently that showed you could obviously, it was a picture of two kids wearing a t-shirt together. Is that the same thing? You could tell obviously they were in trouble and the shirt said, this is our getting along shirt. And they both had to wear a giant t-shirt, one t-shirt on both of them.
That
And
is
mom-
a yellow mother.
I was gonna say, I
Well-
did that and I'm yellow.
At the same time though, and then on the bottom it said we had to sing a couple songs together. Like they had to sing this.
Yeah, that's exactly what putting them in the same boat is. And you can be very creative about how you do it. The only thing is, again, it goes back to the same thing. You have to be at zero. When you apply whatever it is, you have to be at zero in order to do it. Tracy did it once. Her two boys were fighting and they actually got to fisticuffs, and they'd argued a lot before, but they had never actually got to blows, and they were at blows stage, and she was not a happy camper. And so she called her brother, Corey, who lives about a mile away from her, and says, I'm bringing my boys over to dig dandelions in your backyard. And they just moved into the house, and the house backyard was all dandelions. And she said, I do not want you to let them in the house, period. They are not to go in the house. And Corey said, oh, okay. And so she brought over her two boys and gave them each a tablespoon and said, okay, you will dig dandelions here until I come and get you. And she left. And so after a little while, Corey called and said, well, can I take some water out to them? And then it was hot, it was in the summer, and she said, no, they can get a drink from the hose. Do not. And after a while, Corey calls again, can I take them out a popsicle? She said, no, do not. She left him there for 4 hours, all afternoon. And first of all, they're digging and they are furious at each other. I mean, they're still. And then as the heat in the afternoon goes on and they're both suffering the same consequence, they're mad at their mother. And Tracy said, I don't care if they're mad at me. That's okay. That it's that they learn to come back and bond together. And believe me, they never did that again. I mean, they had plenty of their little arguments, but they didn't physically fight again, ever. And so it worked. So depending on what it is that happens, you can be as creative as you want with what you do. But it's not trying to find out who's at fault or who started it, saying you both agreed to do whatever this is. And so you both will be equally, you get to have the same opportunity to repent.
So I have a pastor in my family that he's the one that is always arguing with everyone. And if I say I want to leave and I wanted them both to go out, he would just like sit and like smile at the other one while the other one actually did what I said. Right? So it's like, then what is the next step?
He's bright red. He's bright red. Oh, there's pretty much no.
Okay.
Yeah. So then I would say, you know what? She was so willing to do her part that she is now excused. You may stay out here until dinner, and you get to do both of your parts now. That son is going to hate the fact that you came here. Okay, logical consequences. Logical consequences are one that you frequently will use. You'll use a logical consequence, but you don't always use logical consequences appropriately. And that's where it can very easily become a punishment. There are a couple of rules that have to go with logical consequences. Number one is the consequence has to be related to the incident. Too often we will say, you didn't clean your room, so I'm going to sell your dog. I mean, there's no connection. I mean, that's a little extreme, but you know, we make these that they're not connected, and the reason we do that is because we really want to punish them. Our subconscious goal is to get them, and so if we're going to use a logical consequence, it has to be connected. And the second thing is it has to be respectful of both the child and the parent. You can't say, okay, your consequence is for the next 2 years you can't drive the car. Because number one, it's not reasonable. And number two, if you really enforce that, it punishes you because now you got to take them everywhere. So it has to be respectful to both the child and the adult. It has to be respectful. I'll tell you, I could tell you one that would make you hate me, but we don't have time, about how my son did not go to prom because of a consequence. We don't have quite enough time for that. So I'll tell you a different one. I had a child, I mean, I still have this child, who's a real white, who you can't gate because he has no hot buttons. And I think whites are really hard to parent because they have no hot buttons. I would rather parent a red than a white because reds, you can, they're moving. You just got to help them move in the right direction. And whites sometimes just shut down. And it's just so hard to get them going, get them moving. So that's just my own personal take. Some of you would rather have something else. But this sweet son, I had told him to clean his room. And we had used gating, then you can't go to here unless you do. And he didn't clean it, and he didn't go, and it was fine with him, and he didn't care. And, you know, it just, there was nothing that I could do to get him motivated to clean his room because he didn't care. He really didn't care. So I cared. So it was my problem. It wasn't his because he really didn't care. So one day while he was at school, I cleaned his room it took me all day. I cleaned his room. Man, I found food. I found the dishes I had been missing forever. I found, apple cores, and it was a very interesting experience. But I cleaned it. I changed the sheets on his bed. I, vacuumed and dusted, and everything that was on the floor I put in black garbage sacks, except his suit, which I hung up, and I think his really good pair of tennis shoes I put in his closet. But everything else I put in garbage bags. And I had 2 very large garbage bags. And I took them and I hid them in the garage. And he came home and not much was said. He did say, "Thanks, Mom, for cleaning my room." And I said, "You're welcome." And that was all. That was all that was said. No lecture, nothing. Just, "You're welcome." That weekend he wanted to go on, he had a date. He wanted to go on this date. And he was getting ready for his date. And he came upstairs and he says, "Mom, do you know where my blue shirt is?" And I said, "I think I do." And he said, "Oh, where is it?" And I said, "Well, I think I picked it up. And it's in a garbage sack." And he said, "Oh, can I have it?" And I said, "Sure. You can buy it. You have to pay the maid service." And he said, "Oh, okay. Well, how much is that?" And I said, $20. And he said, "Okay." And I said, "And it will buy you 1 bag." And he said, "Okay, can I go through the bag and see which one has the blue shirt in it?" And I said, "No. But you can buy a bag for $20. "Oh, Mother." Bag. Went down. He was working construction, so he had some money, and I knew he did. But I wanted it to be enough that it hurt. It kind of stung a little bit. So he went down, he got his $20, he handed me his $20, and I brought up the 2 bags, and I said, "Okay, which one do you want?" And he picked one, and he took it downstairs, and of course just dumped it out all over his floor. And his blue shirt wasn't in the bag. So he came back up, and he said, "Can I trade bags?" And I said, "No. But you can buy the other bag for $20. "Mother, that's $40. I know. Maids cost a lot of money. Okay. So he went down, he got me $20. I gave him the other bag. He strewed everything out all over his floor. He found his blue shirt. He ironed it. He went on his date. And he looked handsome. He was a good kid. So at the end, I went down while he was gone on his date and noticed his room was rather in the same state it had been in before. And so when he came home the next day, I said, "Well, I noticed that everything's all over the floor again." "Yeah, it was $40. And I said, "Well, just want you to know the maid's going to come again on Friday. So I hope everything's picked up." "Oh, Mother." So as the week went by, I did not say another word, but it didn't get cleaned up either. And I had told him, I said, "The maid will come on Friday, but this time everything will go to DI." He didn't believe me. So Friday came. I went back down. I did sort a little bit because I didn't want to rebuy really expensive items. So there were a few things, very few, but there were a few things that I hung up in his closet. The rest I put into the bags and I took straight to DI before he got home. And so he really did not have very many clothes left. I mean, enough to get by, but not very many. And he came in and he said, and then he saw his room was clean. I was like, "Mother, did you take my stuff to DI?" And I said, "Maid came. Yep, it's gone." "Mother, how could you do that?" "So sorry. I am so sorry. I'm so sorry you didn't want it. But somebody will be really happy because they can buy it over there at DI." So the weekend came and, "Can I go to DI?" I said, "Sure, you can go to DI. Take the car, go to DI." And from that day on, he started shopping at DI. He loves DI. He loves DI. And he buys some pretty cool stuff. I mean, he dresses nice. He dresses nice. And he just fell in love with DI. He became a DI shopper. But that was a logical consequence. But you can only impose a logical consequence if you can stay at 0. Otherwise, even the tone of your voice immediately turns it into a punishment. So logical consequences, you just have to be careful. Now, with logical consequences, part of making them work is that you also let the child know what the consequence will be before it happens. Logical consequences are not surprises. It's not this, woohoo, I'm going to now make that happen. They know what the consequence will be if they do not do a certain responsibility. They know up front, and they can make the choice of if they want to pay the consequence or not. So there can be consequences for curfew, if you break curfew, and there should be. You always listen first, but there should be something in place, and it's not just arbitrary every time they happen to be late. There should be a consequence that they know about. So, and you can sit down with children and they can make up their own consequences. You can also, with little tiny people, you can have a consequence jar. And it just has like simple jobs in it, or depending on the age of the children. If they're older children, you better have hard jobs. You better have some pretty challenging jobs in there as a consequence. But they can actually go and pick something out of the jar, and then they don't feel so much like you're just coming up with this. I mean, it's already in place. It's already there. They already know that if they don't behave in a certain way, that they will get a consequence, and it's going to be the jar. Little people, it works really good with to have a jar.
But that wouldn't be natural.
No, that's not natural. It's imposed. Natural is if you don't come to dinner, you're hungry. If you don't wear your coat, you're cold. If you go to bed late, you're tired the next day. You don't get to sleep in. You're just tired the next day. That's a natural consequence. And we have a problem with natural consequences is that we tend to rescue. Don't rescue. Did we do natural consequences?
No.
Okay, natural consequences. The biggest problem with a natural consequence is that you rescue. Don't rescue. You can be on their side. If they don't get a project in and they get an F, you don't go calling the teacher and telling them that, pleading their case. And you don't rescue them, because when you do, you've just lost all of the teaching value of the natural consequence. So you don't rescue. Yes?
So how do you overcome, because I have a daughter that very much needs natural and logical consequences, and right now in my closet, there are garbage bags full of her things, like your story. But I have a hard time just like sitting back and watching, like knowing that maybe her homework's not done and that she's gonna go to school, and I'm just like dying inside. Like,
How old is she?
9. And just those things, like it's so hard for me to like stop that. Like I'm just like, I can't handle it myself.
Mm-hmm.
Like, how do I get over it myself, and like letting her go to school with maybe knowing that her homework's not done? Like, I feel like responsible, like, oh, the teacher's gonna think I'm an awful mother because I didn't have my child do her homework.
Well, at age 9, I would say that they're still in a learning curve. And I would take much more responsibility for helping her get her homework done at age 9 than I would at 16. So at age 9, there can be consequences for, there has to be, I would sit down with her and I would discuss, are you sure she's not getting it done, or do you think she's not getting it done?
Well, she's just very, very slow to do anything and everything. And so we've just been trying to incorporate more natural and logical. So she does. She hasn't gone to school a lot without it, but it's just those moments of like it's like at the 13th hour, like I can't handle this, like, and so then I get like,
You may have to go lock yourself in the bathroom. No, what I'm saying is, if she's actually doing it and she's not falling behind and she's just slow, you can do and this is where I would use the positive rewards, if you will, where you can earn points. And if your homework is done before 7 o'clock, you earn points towards something that you want to do on Saturday, whether it's an ice cream date with dad or whatever, to help, because we really do need to help motivate them to work a little faster and stay more focused, because as they get into high school, they're going to have to. They won't be able to get it done because they end up getting more. And if she's just one of those really brilliant children that can get it done in high school, college will be a real difficult thing. So it's teaching time management as well as the responsibility of having homework done. So, and at 9, you're still in that curve where you can help teach and train. So, and that's what I would do. I would just talk to her. I'd talk to her about how she feels about it. Maybe if it doesn't bother her and she's getting it all done, then you just have to learn to control yourself. But if you want to help her get it, but if it's kind of bothering her and she feels like she doesn't ever have time to do anything she wants to do, and it's, because then there's your hot button, then you use that and help her. But you walk beside her. Anytime you're teaching and training, you walk beside them. You walk with them. So if it means I need to kind of sit down and help you stay focused and maybe ask you questions while you're doing this project so that you can stay focused, then I'm willing to do that. That she knows that you're on her side. You're not punishing her because she's not quick enough, but you're trying to help her stay focused and get things done.
You know she could be quick though.
That's what I mean. But she doesn't know she can. So it's motivating
my
her.
problem more than anything.
It's trying to motivate her into self-discovery. But yes, and that becomes a parental problem. Our problem as parents, we want to control them because we know their life would be happier if they do it our way, because our way's right. And if they doubt it, they ought to ask us, and we'll tell them that we're right. Yeah. Whoa, I'm not going there.
So I have a 9-year-old too, and he's like a redhead 9-year-old, and so it's pretty tough. But we've implemented. They know the jobs they're supposed to do. We have a list, because he's such a red, I'm like, I expect the list to be done before I say goodnight to you, and I expect the list to be done before you go outside and play with anybody. And we don't do TV during the week. And then I had to step back because I am also a red, and so I had to figure out how to step back and let him just do his thing, and then his consequence is like death for him, which he has not had imposed yet because he will not. It's taking away his slip pants and his slip shirts, he loves those, and that I will take away the outfit if he's not done by the time I go say goodnight to him at bed. And so I let him have his space, but then I'll just be like, oh, bummer, I'm gonna take this outfit from you, and we talked about it, and he will not let it happen because he's also a red, so he doesn't want that consequence imposed. But it has been fantastic for my sanity because I'm always like, get this done, get this done, get this done, get this done. Yeah, and I'm sick of it, and so we just did.
But see, that's what you have to step back and not nag.
I've been working on that. I've been working on it.
Yeah.
But it's like so hard.
But as you can
her,
see,
like,
sure.
It's getting 7 o'clock and like.
But you can see that it doesn't work. So if we're doing something that doesn't work, even if we do it with more intensity, it won't make it work. It still doesn't work. So we have to change what we're doing. Okay, I am willing to stand here and confess that Andrea is right again. I don't think I've ever gotten through this class, ever. Have I ever? See, and I'm still working on it. I'm going to work on it. I'm going to get better. We usually get to 10, so we have 4 more to do next week. And I promise you that we will do them because the last one I think is probably the most powerful. And you don't even have it on your list. And it's so awesome. So what I want you to do this week is I want you to read that article on family councils. And I want you to try at least 2 new tools. And I promise you that as you try them, you will hate them. Isn't that lovely for me to say? And the reason is because it probably won't work. Because number one, you're just learning how to try it, learning how to implement it, and you're probably going to be a little skittish on how you do it. You won't be firm and kind in doing it because you're a little bit nervous about how it'll go over, and so you tend to be a little apprehensive about applying something new. And the second thing is, and I don't think we discussed this before, that anytime you change what you do, your child will become worse before they become better. And the reason is, let's go back to the nagging for homework, and you decide to do something different, have a consequence, and just back out and let it go. Even if the nagging is negative, they're familiar with it. It's like they know what's coming, they know what's happening, they know what level mom gets to before she rubs. And even though if somebody said, do you like your mom to nag at you? You say, no, I hate her. I hate that. Even though they would say that, they're comfortable because they know that that's what the situation is. They're familiar with it. So when you change, it's like they push against you to get you to go back and do what they're familiar with. Does that make sense? Even though they don't like it. Because they're familiar with it, it's their comfort zone. So when you back out and refuse to argue with them or refuse to nag at them, don't be surprised if they act a little bit worse in the beginning to try to push you into doing what you've always done before. But don't give in. Don't give in. And you'll find that then it will improve. Have you had a baby that you decided to let cry through the night instead of getting up every half hour to put the binky back in? If you ever, say, I am so sick of doing this. I'm so sick of doing this. I'm not going to do it anymore. The first night you decide that you're not going to get up, that baby just wails. And you lay in bed, and my husband used to put an arm and a leg over me and say, you will not get up. You will not get up. You will not. My baby's crying. And so, but the crying gets more intense as they're trying to bring back what's familiar to them. If I cry longer, louder, mom will come. But after 1 or 2 nights, they stop crying because mom didn't come. And then they sleep through the night the rest of their life. So it's that same kind of a thing that don't be surprised if the behavior gets worse before it gets better. Okay? Don't think you're not doing it right. Just keep trying. And I promise you that you'll have then better results. Better results. Okay. In closing, I'm going to read you this thing that's really awesome and cool, and it reminds me of President Uchtdorf. If you were taking a long trip from, say, San Francisco to Hawaii aboard a 747 with several other people, you might be appalled if you knew who was flying the airplane. See, it's really not President Uchtdorf. It's not the pilots. It's a couple of guys named Fred and George. Fred and George are 2 black boxes, and they really are referred to as Fred and George. Fred is a gizmo called an internal navigational system, and Fred knows at every moment exactly where the airplane is and where it is supposed to be. In the old days, a human navigator took a look at his instruments and did some figuring, and by the time he had the position worked out, the plane was long gone from that spot. Fred knows right now where the plane is, and George is the autopilot. He moves the controls to guide the airplane this way or that, and speeds it up or slows it down. He and Fred talk to each other constantly. If their conversation were in English instead of computer, it would sound something like this. Fred will say, George, we are off course 2 degrees to starboard. And George would say, okay, Fred, I'll fix it. George, we're off 3 degrees to port. Okay, Fred, I'll fix it. George, we're 40 knots below our airspeed. Okay, Fred, I'll fix it. George, we're 300 feet too low. Okay, Fred, I'll fix it. This conversation continues all the way to Hawaii, and George and Fred bring the giant plane within 1,000 yards of the runway in Honolulu within 5 minutes of the scheduled time of arrival. The incredible thing is not so much the accuracy of Fred and George, but the fact that the airplane has been in error 90% of the time. In error 90% of the time, and still it lands on target, on schedule. The secret is that George made thousands of errors in driving the airplane, but for each error, Fred called out a correction and George corrected. The flight line was made up of thousands of small jogs and crisscrosses that went across the ideal straight line, but still put the airplane at its destination when it was supposed to be there. A rocket to the moon travels in exactly the same way. If we human beings could see that we can get a 747 to Honolulu or a rocket to the moon, even having been in error 90% of the time, we might be a little less uptight about being in error ourselves. The secret to the success of Fred and George is correction. They work as a perfect team. Fred spots the error, George corrects it. Some humans don't work that way. To be in life means we are constantly off course. What is important is not that we are off course, but whether or not we make the corrections that need to be made. Human beings differ from Fred and George in one important and often fatal respect: the desire to protect one's position. We do that as parents, and our children do it as children, that we want to be right, and we sometimes have a hard time admitting that we need correction. So in disciplining, the goal is to make it so safe that our children actually value the opportunity to become better and correct their course. I have a grandson who is teaching at the MTC down at UIU, and he's a phenomenal teacher, but he wants to get better. And so he actually invited a supervisor to come into his class and critique him, to sit in his class and tell him how to be a better teacher, because he was seeking to improve. And that's what we want to instill in our children by using discipline instead of punishment. Discipline, used the correct way, inspires a desire for improvement. And that's our goal, that they desire to improve and become like God. I bear you this testimony in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Our Father in heaven, we're thankful that we could be at class this morning. And we're thankful for the things that we've been able to learn and understand. And please bless us this week as we take them home, that we'll be able to find things that will help us to train our children and ourselves to be more like you. We're thankful for the opportunity we have to come and listen to Sister Tanner and for the time that she's taken to work these things through for us. And we say these things in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.